Welcome back to the Nuckhead podcast. I hope everyone's having a great morning. The Canucks are winning. They're winning now, but they won 2 games against not so great teams, San Jose Sharks and the Anaheim Ducks. So, we'll take it with a grain of salt. I'm not worried about them though. Honestly, this team is really good. I'm sure they're gonna figure out all the things that are not looking that great right now, such as the power play. That's something. By the way, so I haven't posted a video in a while now, and it's because I'm stacking up 6 games into one video. It wasn't intentional, okay? It just kind of, I bit off a bit more than I could chew, and the video got bigger and bigger and bigger. I couldn't finish it on time, and so then I just decided, okay, I'm gonna do a 6-game video. The biggest video I've ever done is 4, and just see if it's interesting. It's gonna be over 20 minutes long. It'll be like an episode of a TV show, basically. And if it's received well, maybe I don't think I'll do it often, but it'll be cool to know that I can do it from time to time. So for those of you wondering, sorry about that, but it will be coming out tomorrow, Friday, between 4 and 5 p.m. I just have to do a few more little touch-ups and then add the LA Kings game, which is happening tonight at 7 o'clock. The Canucks are playing the Kings. And I don't know yet, maybe you guys have heard the news, if there is any news at all, but Dakota Joshua might be in the lineup tonight. So that's exciting. If he is, that's huge news. But if not, he's days away. So that's also very, very exciting. Anyways, okay, I lost my train of thought on what I originally was talking about, but who cares, because this episode is a very, very special one, because today's guest is a legend in Canucks media, Satiar Shah. And for anyone listening who somehow doesn't know who Satiar Shah is, well, guess what? You do. He's the co-host of Canucks Central, which is a Canucks-focused podcast and radio show that broadcasts Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. and after every Canucks game. But he's also part of the Canucks broadcast along with Dan Murphy and Ian McIntyre talking in between periods of most games. Yeah, we got a celebrity on the show, guys. Anyway, without further ado, please welcome Satiar Shah. All right, Satiar Shah, welcome to the Nuckhead podcast. How are you doing?
I am great, dude. It's honestly, we talked about this before, but I like your work. I'm really excited to have a Canucks chat with you here today, man.
I mean, let's just jump right into it. What are your thoughts on the Canucks so far through 10 games? Also, I should acknowledge we're recording this before the Ducks game tonight, which we'll talk about later. But
right.
Through the first 10 games, what do you think?
Honestly, I think everything is fine. Generally speaking, I don't mean fine as in the dog meme, the house is burning down. This is fine. I mean literally, everything is fine. And we were kind of going over this on the show yesterday. Last year through 10 games, the Canucks had 15 points. This year through 10 games, they have 13 points. And I think we all agree they're playing nowhere near as well as they did last year at this time, which to me is optimistic, because if you're getting results this way and not playing your best, you can imagine how much better they can be. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go on to win the President's Trophy or surpass last year's point totals, but I think they're off to a fine start. And I think, this idea that a team is going to find its identity right away through 10 games is not usually realistic anyways. So I think they're off to a fine start. Again, repeating myself, but I think the way the season has gone and the upside for improvement, not only from individual players, but their team game is there. So I really don't see any big concerns outside of hopefully trying to get some of those star players going again.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 2-point difference there, and I listened to that episode of your show, and it does add up, right? That is a big difference when you look at the pace they're on. But what's interesting is, unless I'm mistaken, at the start of last season, the first 10 games, everyone was playing well. I mean, I don't really remember there being there definitely wasn't a question mark on Pettersson. I think maybe Garland had a bit of a slow start, but other than that, if I'm remembering correctly, everyone started really well, right? And now they're only 2 points off, and there's a lot of question marks on a few different players, whether it be Pettersson or obviously the injuries to Demko and Joshua. So that's, I think that's also worth mentioning, is that they haven't reached their full potential yet, so I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, nowhere near. I mean, just to kind of bring that point home for you, last year at this time, Pettersson was almost at 2 points per game, and now this year he's at half a point per game, or even less through the first 10 games. JT Miller and Quinn Hughes. I mean, Pettersson, Hughes, and Miller, I think this time last year were 1, 2, 3 in league scoring. So you're right. I mean, the scoring rate is nowhere near. And right now, the Canucks are 28th in goals in the league so far in the year, and goals per game they're 18. So they're not scoring at anywhere near the same rate they did last year, and they're just 2 points off that pace.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like the schedule hasn't been that difficult. I mean, there's no easy games in the NHL, but it's not like they've been up against juggernauts. So it's an interesting time. You mentioned this with Don Taylor on the last episode of Canucks Central, but it's funny how like it depends on which way you look at it. Someone can make an argument that there's a lot to worry about, and someone can make the argument that there's nothing to worry about. And honestly, both sides are just stuck right in the middle, I think. So, but I'm on the side. Yeah, I agree. I think they're fine. Do you think, because going into the season, a lot of people were saying, and I'm saying a lot of people, they might have all been Canucks fans, so bear with me.
Yeah.
In the cup contending conversation. Where do you stand on that prior to these 10 games, and has it changed your opinion?
No, I mean, I honestly, I don't really change my opinion on things 10, 15 games in, unless it's just so obvious that something is amiss or something has really taken a step and it's just indisputable. And usually 10, 15 games to me isn't enough. I really want to get 20, 25 games before I maybe reassess where I am on a team. So before the season, I did view the Canucks as, so to me, they're not a tier 1 contender. Like I think, there's a couple of teams that you would put ahead of Vancouver, but I think that tier 1 contending list is maybe 3 or 4 teams deep, and that's maybe at most. And I think the Canucks kind of fall into that second tier right below, which means they have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. And I think they're in about the same spot they were last year. But when you look at the rest of the league, and this is where I think sometimes people get so caught up in the holes the Canucks have, but it's also relative to the rest of the teams in the league. Even the teams I'm talking about perhaps being tier 1, they have holes too. Like, for instance, a lot of people want to put Edmonton into that tier 1. We all know what their defense looks like outside their top pair, right? We also know that they've had some injuries, some depth issues. Are they a fast enough team or not? But you give the benefit of doubt, of course, to McDavid and Draisaitl and the fact that they're a very talented team with a lot of scoring punch up front. Right. But I don't think the Canucks are that far off as far as their overall depth. And I think when you look at Vancouver compared to them or even some other teams, I don't think they're too far off. Like, I think, honestly, if Pettersson was playing at a higher level, and if you're starting to see some higher levels from internal players, I think you can make the argument that this team as constructed is very close to that tier 1 contending type of team. But I think we all agree they need another blue liner at some point. I think Brandstrom's been a really nice fit. He's done a lot of positive things, but is he truly somebody that can carry a D pair? And I think if they could add that player, the Canucks are a surefire tier 1 contender. And even if you're a tier 2 contender, you still have a chance. So that's my take of it heading into the season. And yes, I know Pettersson's not playing at his best, and I know there are things they have to clean up, but I haven't seen anything to suggest the Canucks have fallen down a tier as far as being a contender.
Who do you put in that tier 1 contending? You said there's 3 or 4 teams. I mean, Florida for sure. Would you put Edmonton there?
I mean, I put Edmonton by default. I think they're the only Western team I put there. I think Dallas, as much as people want to put them in that group, I'm hesitant because I don't know if the blue line moves they made are making them a better team. I know Stankoven's off to a good start, but you can maybe put them in there. But to me, the 3 teams, the other team in the East, they're the New York Rangers. I'm a big fan of what the Rangers have. I think they have a lot of depth. They're high end up front. They probably need to get more out of Zibanejad in the playoffs. But you go through the blue line, go through the goaltending, go through the depth. I don't see many holes in that roster. But I don't think, again, like the Canucks are that far off. But those are the 3 teams I would put in the tier 1 contending list. It's Edmonton, the Rangers, and the Panthers.
Yeah, I agree. Also, kind of similar with the whole you never want to count out McDavid or Draisaitl. It's the same with Shesterkin to me. Yeah, at least the way he's been playing for the last couple seasons, he's incredible. But I mean, speaking of goalies, Demko, I keep hearing, oh, he'll be back this time. Oh, he'll be back this time. He'll be back this time. Oh, Lankinen's playing really well, so maybe they're just going to take time with Demko. What's the most recent thing you've heard for his timeline? And do you think, like, obviously, would you rather have Demko or Lankinen? The answer is going to be Demko. But when Lankinen's playing this well, and the Canucks are still kind of, I mean, win a couple, lose a couple, win a couple, is that going to solve as many issues as people kind of make it sound like it's going to? You know what I mean? What do you think there?
Well, I think, obviously, if you have Demko and Lankinen as your duo, it's far better than Lankinen and Shilovs. And I like Shilovs' potential, but if you can tell that right now, it's, his game isn't where it needs to be and he needs to clean up a little bit. And, the Canucks' worst showings so far have been with him in net. And it's not just all his fault. Like, there's been a lot of breakdowns as well, and he's been under a lot of duress. But his game obviously hasn't been at the level we saw last year in the playoffs. And I think that's normal. I think as far as, some concern around Shilovs, perhaps people got a bit overly enthusiastic over what he did last year and kind of forgot that he's still a developing goaltender who has to work on his game, but has a very high ceiling, of course. So, I mean, I think what it would do is it does shore up your goaltending. And I think as far as Lankinen playing really well, I think the best thing you can do with Demko is ease him in. And if you have somebody you can trust and you don't have to play Demko more than, say, a couple games in a row, you don't have to use him at all in back-to-back, which they don't do anyways. But I think it could allow them to really ease him in. And so he can still work on strengthening his knee, making sure he's, on top of his physical stature, which obviously is the big concern. So I think if you actually don't have pressure with him having to play every game, I think it would make his recovery a lot easier. And as far as the first part of your question, so going back to the offseason, this is back in September, I had kind of heard, and this has kind of been standard or what a lot of people heard, that maybe mid-November is kind of when we were going to see Demko. The earliest timeline I had heard was perhaps Halloween, but obviously that's come and passed and he's not quite ready. But based on the stuff that's kind of been out there recently, it's 2 or 3 weeks from now, which still puts him in that mid-November range. To be honest, like I've always heard that it was mid-November more realistically. Now, is that going to be the last week of November, the second or third week of November? We'll ultimately see. But I do think as much as there's been talk about setbacks and talk about, things haven't gone well for him, I don't think the timeline has really shifted going back to September.
Do you think the play of Lankinen has, because obviously Demko, I would imagine as a person, doesn't really care about how well Lankinen's playing. Obviously, he's happy his team's winning, but he just wants to get back as soon as possible. But the coaches, the management, the trainers, they're probably, I would imagine, seeing Lankinen playing well and just saying like, hey, let's take it easy. We don't need to rush him back. Do you think that's going to add weeks on, or like, what do you think is going to happen there?
I don't think that how Lankinen has played has materially changed the timeline in any way, shape, or form. I do think what it has helped doing, and this is where a guy like Demko, who's super competitive, doesn't want to miss time, and even admitted that maybe he was overly optimistic, thinking he could come back in the playoffs and play in the Western Conference Final if the Canucks would have got past.
Oh, right.
And I think that was more about, you try to tell yourself you can, and maybe you're optimistic you can, but it's maybe not that realistic, Yeah. So I do think, he's always going to push. And if the goaltending situation was poor, would he maybe not be fully honest about where his knee's at because he wants to get back? Maybe he feels pressure to get back earlier. But I think organizationally, as far as the way they've gone about it with their medical staff, I think no matter what the goal situation was going to be, they were going to take their time with Demko. And the big thing is they realize how important he is in the playoffs. And I know how good Lankinen has been so far, but Lankinen doesn't have a track record of being a number one goalie for a full year or even playing in the playoffs. So as good as he's been, I don't think you can sit here and say, oh, he's going to be our guy. He's going to be fine in the playoffs. You have to see more before you feel good about that. And I think as far as Demko goes, they realize their best chance of winning is having Demko in the playoffs. So their entire goal this year is, obviously you can't get ahead of yourself. You have to make the playoffs first, but it's like, how do we ensure that he can be healthy this year? And how do we ensure that we get the best out of him come playoff time? Because who knows if you have more than these next 2 years with Demko, right? Because who knows how comfortable you are signing a contract extension and, and all that. So I don't think there's been any real certainty internally that he's going to be here beyond these next 2 years. And I'm not saying they're going to trade him, but they really view it as, if we don't have him beyond these 2 years, how do we get the best out of one of the best goalies, if not the best goalie, when he's on top of his game? So I don't think, as far as organizationally, that the Lankinen play is changing Demko's timeline. But I think for guys competitive as Demko, feeling assured that the net is in good hands perhaps stops him from overextending himself to come back early.
Speaking of returns, it seems like Dakota Joshua is days away. Where do you think he's going to fit in the lineup, and who's going to be pushed out?
Okay, so I think this is a really fascinating question, right? Because I don't think anybody really deserves to come out right now as far as how they played. I know Arshdeep just got sent down, and Aatu Ratu is going to play down the middle here against the Anaheim Ducks on Tuesday night. So whenever Dakota Joshua comes back, Ratu's obviously easy guy to drop out. But the way Suter's played so far, and if he continues to be a fit, at least for the time being, playing alongside Elias Pettersson and Connor Garland, then do you want to have a center on your roster for Thursday's game against the Kings if he comes back in that game? So I think as far as the Ducks game goes, it's going to be really interesting to see how these guys play. Like Höglander, he's going to have to play a good game, right? Yeah. Same thing with a guy like same thing with Aatu Ratu, and same thing with Daniel Sprong. Those three guys are the guys that are going to have to play really well or do everything they can to stay in the lineup because they're the easy guys to come out. So when Joshua comes back, I don't know if he'll get the chance right away to play with Pettersson and Garland, but I do think at some point, whether it's a game in or 2 games in, or hey, if he looks good the first game, the second period or whatever, he's going to get a chance to play up the lineup. I think based on the contract they gave him, based on the growth he showed in his game, that they want to see if he can do a little bit more. And based on the fact that we've seen DeBrusk so far not mesh with Pettersson, there's a real good chance I think we see Garland with Joshua and Pettersson down the middle. Now, again, how soon is that after Joshua comes back? I'm not quite sure, but I do think internally that's something they want to see, because if that can actually work, maybe you solve that winger problem for Pettersson and DeBrusk can kind of slot in playing alongside Miller and Boeser, at least for the time being.
Yeah, that's my dream. I mean, there was a string of games last year. I think it might have only been one game. I can't remember, but they had Joshua and Garland play up with Miller, and that was the moment I realized, of course, the combination of those two with Blueger was fantastic all year, but it really is Joshua and Garland's chemistry that can kind of just move up and down the lineup. And I don't think they ever played with Pettersson, at least not for any extended period of time that I'm aware of. And that especially now with Pettersson struggling, I mean, I would love to see that. I really would. And also the Blueger Sherwood Heinen line has been maybe the most consistent line the Canucks have had all year. They are incredible. They're exactly the type of line that the Blueger, Joshua, and Garland line was last year. So I wouldn't want to split that up either.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. And such a good point about Teddy Blueger, who, I think a lot was made last year about Garland and Joshua's chemistry, and you're bang on. Their chemistry is fantastic. And, I was kind of joking about this last year, but it's not quite Nazem and Bertuzzi, but those two guys were the guys who had the chemistry on the line, not so much the center. Those were the guys that made the line work, right? Not so much the guy in the middle. And that's usually rare. It's usually the center that's a big part of it. But I think throughout that conversation, what we did was underestimate how well Teddy Blueger was playing. And I think when you look at Blueger this year, he's been terrific. You're absolutely right. Like, he's really the engine on that line. I know Sherwood gets it on the forecheck, and I know Heinen's been very responsible, but it's the smarts that Blueger plays with. It's the defensive prowess he plays with. And I think his skill level is underrated. Like, he almost scored 30 points last year. And if you get 30 points playing down the lineup for a guy who gets no power play time, I think that's solid production for a player who plays 14, 15 minutes a game. And if you can actually get close to 10 goals, I think you're talking about somebody who can be a bona fide third line center for this team. And that was one of the questions we had about this year after the team went after Lindholm and couldn't bring him back. And we saw that they wanted to have the center depth. Do they feel good enough about Blueger, about Suter, or perhaps about Aatu Ratu that they don't have to go outside the organization like last year to go and acquire another center, right? Yeah. But if the way Blueger is going about things and the way Suter is playing, and you have Ratu knocking on the door, I really don't have any concerns about the Canucks center depth. And I think the way Blueger has played, I think really impresses the point about how valuable he's been. And I think he deserves more credit going back to last year for how big a part he was of the success that trio had with Garland and Joshua.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, isn't Joshua also a center?
He can play center. Now, he hasn't really played center in Vancouver. He did that with the Blues a little bit here and there. And, I know that's how he's listed on some of the hockey pages, but he really hasn't played center for a long time. Now,
what made them push him to the wing?
I think it was more than anything is they wanted him to be that big time forechecker and a guy that can get on the forecheck and be physical. And part of the reason it didn't work out with the Blues was they converted him to the wing. They wanted him to be this crash and bang, physical and forward type player. And he was kind of growing towards it, but it didn't quite happen. And I think the best thing for him was simplify his game and get him to be in the tough spots, have him along the wall, get him in front of the net. And that's where he's having a lot of success. Whereas we have him playing center, you get him away from those areas a lot. You get him to play a more well-rounded game, and I think you take away from his stronger skill sets by making him do things he's not as good as doing at the NHL level. Like, I'm not sure he has the pace to play down the middle and the defensive acumen to be a good center. But I think on the wing, he can be a real crash and bang in your face type of player. And he lives around the net. You see how well he can score, the hands he has there. So I think it's about having him playing in those spots more, and that's more effective as a winger.
Totally. Yeah, I'm so excited to see what he can do when he gets back. He's one of my favorite players on the team. He's just so exciting to watch, and yeah, he's so sneaky with the skill he has. Like he doesn't pull it out all the time, but then like you'll be watching a game and out of nowhere, like the Anaheim game last year, he'll just put it through his legs, top shelf. Like it's just like, where does this come from? He just hit a guy into the boards and then pulls this off. It does kind of remind me of Bertuzzi a little.
Yeah, it's kind of like poor man's Bertuzzi, and not to take anything away from Dakota Joshua, but there are a lot of those elements. And honestly, like I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to score goals at the rate he has, because there's no track record of him scoring at that type of level at the AHL level or even in the NHL before he came to Vancouver. But you're right, like his hands around the net, how good he is at finishing those chances, and how well he's able to use his body to shield the puck and find open space for himself. Like he's really found another gear in Vancouver. Like he's a legitimately good net front player now.
Based on what I'm hearing lately, and you mentioned this earlier, it seems like the Canucks management is ready to make a significant trade for a defender, specifically one that can move the puck. And there's been a lot of talk about who they might want to bring in. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But I also want to know, who do you think the Canucks are willing to move to make a deal like that happen?
So as far as who are they willing to bring in, I don't think that has been crystallized quite yet. And I know Frank Siravalli mentioned the Canucks have been calling. I've heard the Canucks have been working the phone lines. This is going back to even the preseason, looking at what's happening around the league. Nothing is imminent. I know the name that's come up so far is Bowen Byram. And hey, who doesn't love Bowen Byram, right? Like who wouldn't want to have Bowen Byram on their hockey team?
He did, right?
And yeah, exactly, right. He'd be fantastic. So far, I have not heard that he's been made available. I think teams have called and asked about Byram. My understanding is the Sabres haven't made any acknowledgement that he's actually available. It's more about, okay, tell me what you think, maybe circle back later. So I don't think there's anything imminent on anything big so far. But the big question is going to be, what are the Canucks willing to give up? Because you can't get a guy like Byram unless you're willing to trade away either a significant player off your roster or a massive amount of futures. Like you're not getting him unless you're trading Willander and a first-round pick, right?
Oh.
But here's the thing. Is that what the Buffalo Sabres want? The Sabres are trying to get out of that rebuild. They've had futures for years. Do they value a guy who could be ready in 2 years and another draft pick, or are they trying to get somebody who can help you today? If they want somebody that can help you today, which lines up with them trying to be a playoff team and really push for a playoff spot, what can the Canucks trade off their roster that could make Buffalo happy and also have the Canucks still maintain their contender status? And I love the way Garland's played. I'm not sure Garland gets it done, and Brock Boeser, for instance, he's a free agent at the end of this year. Does that even work? And if Vancouver trades Brock Boeser or Garland, they'd have to find another winger, for instance, right? Hey, I love Niels Höglander. I would trade Höglander in the right deal. I don't know if he's enough to move the needle for a Bowen Byram type. So my question is going to be, if you really want the Byram type or a guy who is 24, 25 and has a lot of control available, you can sign a long-term contract to, I'm not sure the Canucks are the best trade partner for that. Maybe for a guy who's a bit older, that could be more of a rental, has 1 year left in his deal, that wouldn't cost as much, could be more in line.
Right.
But I love the idea of going after a Byram type, but I mean, I can pose you the same question. Like, what do you think the Canucks could trade off their roster that would not only make Buffalo happy, but also keep Vancouver as a contender? And that's a really hard trade to figure out, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of getting rid of a guy like Willander, I mean, that would be painful. But I know if you want to win now, you got to make those choices. And the thing is, like, you're right. I mean, Buffalo, do they want another prospect? They've got so many young guys who have promising futures ahead of them. So, like, I don't know if that would work. Byram would be such a big get. I was thinking more like, I mean, I've heard the name Dante Fabbro tossed around for quite a while now, dating back to last year. And I think getting someone like him, I mean, Nashville would also want a roster player, but I feel like it would be a little cheaper. And I would think the Canucks, I mean, it would be a forward being moved if it is a roster player, because they've got forward depth right now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, right?
It is difficult. It really is. that actually like leads into my next question perfectly, because do you think there's a chance we'll see a guy like Kirill Kudryavtsev called up this season before a trade is made, just to make sure they don't have the answer already in their system?
I think, I mean, obviously it could happen. I think we could see him. We could see other players come up and get a chance. But the reason why I'm hesitant to say, even if he shows up and plays well, is how often do you see rookie defensemen come up and not only acquit themselves well at the regular season level, but then also seamlessly play at a high level come playoff time? And what are we asking of Kudryavtsev? Are you asking him to, if he plays well, to play on the third pair and play 14, 15 minutes a game in a more sheltered role? Or do you expect a rookie defenseman, if he shows well, to play 20 minutes a game in high leverage playoff situations? It's probably asking too much. And we even saw it with, the Canucks young players. You saw how much Pettersson struggled. You saw Hughes even at times struggling in the playoffs. And these are elite level players trying to find their way in the postseason. So when it comes to these young guys, and I'm all for getting young guys involved, I'm just very hesitant to assume that any of them are going to be a big solution come playoff time. If they can play depth roles for you in the playoffs and help you out, to me, that's huge. That's massive. Even if you could get Kudryavtsev to come and play on your third pair in the playoffs when injuries happen, I think that's a huge boost to have, right?
Yeah.
I just don't know if we can assume whether it's him or even Lekkerimäki. Like, I know how talented he is, but for a rookie, how often do you see rookies explode in the playoffs? It's a very hard thing to do. So I want to see these guys play. I hope they can get a chance. And I would love to see them be part of the playoff roster if they show well. I'm just hesitant assuming that they're going to be able to play significant roles in the playoffs.
Yeah, man, it's a tight position to be in, because there are defensemen. I mean, I don't know how available they are, but they're in the conversations, like even someone like Jakob Chychrun. But you're right. What with Washington, like they're off to a super good start right now. Even if they are going to move Chychrun, they are not going to want, a first round pick. They're going to want someone who can potentially help the team now and make the best of Ovechkin's final few years, right? So, I don't know. That's a tough one.
It's really tough.
It's cool because I have full confidence that one day we're going to wake up to news that Allvin pulled off some crazy shit, and we're going to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like it seems like it keeps happening like that.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I've gone through the exercise of going through every single team's roster and looking at players that are available potentially as UFAs at the end of the year, or players who could become available. And just going through that list, it's very hard to find like the perfect fit. And all these guys that you look at, there are guys that have term left on their contracts, right? Like, for instance, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have Damon Severson, who they traded for last year. It hasn't really gone smoothly for them, but he's a very capable right-hand defenseman. He has 7 years left at $6.25 million, right? So it's like how comfortable, even if he is available, how comfortable are you that he's going to be able to live up to that contract and then add him to your roster? Now, if you feel good about it, maybe that's a cheap solution. And I'm not even saying he's available, but because of the scarcity of defensemen and there's very few rentals available, like these are the considerations teams have to make. It's like, how willing are you to risk future flexibility for this year? And in the past, sure, you could trade a draft pick and it's a guy's a rental. And hey, if he doesn't come back, sure, that sucks. But at least you have the cap space available to you. At least you have flexibility to do other things. Whereas you're adding a player with term, you're locked in. And that's a bigger commitment. So you're right. Like right now, when we look through it, it's very hard to find a perfect fit. But that's why these guys get paid what they do. And that's why Patrick Allvin is one of the most active GMs, because he's able to find these value bets somewhere. And it wouldn't surprise me either that we see them go after somebody that perhaps people on the outside look at and say, hey, what about, I don't know if this guy's any good. He's playing 17 minutes a game. He hasn't done this or that, but they feel like he can do better in this environment. So I don't think they're anywhere near finished looking at which players they go after. And like you said, it wouldn't shock me that, in a few months they make a trade and we're like, I didn't even realize that guy was available. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I guess if they do get a guy with term, that would almost solidify the fact that one of the young defensive prospects would be included, because they gotta consider the fact that like Willander could be ready. I mean, they're a playoff team now. I don't think we'll see him come play games. Well, do you think we'll see Willander play games at the end of this college year?
So I'm not 100% on it. I do think the plan, I think that the ideal plan for the Canucks was he spends 2 years, 2 full seasons in the NCAA, and then comes and joins the team at the end of the regular season, and then is part of the roster in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in Vancouver or going down to Abbotsford. I think that's going to be really dependent on how the rest of his season goes here. He's got off to a great start. They're very high on his potential. As long as he's healthy and gets through the year, I would expect that he does sign at the end of the year and plays a couple of games. It just goes back to the same thing we said about Kudryavtsev. Even if he signs, what can you realistically expect? And as talented as he is, I'm not sure he's quite Cale Makar, who stepped in and played in the playoffs for his first taste and looked really good. So I'd be very careful with assuming a lot. But I think there's a good chance we see him on the Canucks roster before the season ends.
You mentioned Boeser. I don't think you were implying that he's on the block, but is there, like, what do you think? Is there a chance they might move him?
So what I would say about this front office is that they don't say no to anything. And I think sometimes that's, I wouldn't say has gotten them in trouble, but I think, remember last year or 2 years ago, the stuff about JT Miller, how the Penguins had called, and apparently there was talk the Canucks were shopping him. So what the Canucks do when you call about any one of their players, they listen. If you call about Quinn Hughes, they won't say, "Oh, don't talk to us about Quinn." Okay, what do you have to say? And then they'll politely say, "Okay, thanks for your thoughts. We're not doing this," right? But I think that they're the type of front office that wants to get information from other teams. So if you call them and ask them about a player, they'll give you an answer and see what you have to say. They want to find intel. So if you call Vancouver about Quinn Hughes and you hang up the phone, that's a missed opportunity, because what you're doing is not collecting intel from a team to find out not only what they're after, but what are they willing to trade off their roster, or what futures they're looking to move. So now you have intel on a team and what their desires are and what assets could be available in the market. So for them, they'd rather just listen to what teams have to say to collect intel. So they don't say no right out of the bat very often. I'm sure they've done it in the past, but so I'd say yes. You can't dismiss the possibility that if the Canucks don't agree to a contract with Brock Boeser, that they would move him and find another player to fit that role and also get some futures. I don't think that's the plan, but I do think if for whatever reason they can't agree to a contract, they might be very reluctant to let that asset go for nothing, especially if you can find another rental winger to give you, say, 75% of what Brock did, and then you have futures on top of that for next season. So I think it's a possibility, but I think the number one goal for the Canucks is going to be to get Boeser signed, and we'll see where that's at. It wouldn't shock me if we see him sign an extension before the new year. Like, it wouldn't shock me at all. But every goal he scores, every day that passes, his case gets stronger and stronger. And at some point, players say, you know what? I know you're offering me decent money. I might make even more in free agency. So that's going to be the thing to watch here for Brock Boeser, because I don't think these guys want to let him walk for nothing.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's early, but he's on pace for another 40-goal season. Yeah, I mean, I want him on the team, but I want everybody on the team, but it's just not possible. Yeah, I'm interested to see what do you think the price would be? Like would it be like around Miller's, like $8 million, or? Yeah,
I think so. If the Carter Verhaeghe deal was just a bit over $7 million over 7 years, I think it was. Now Verhaeghe is a bit different because it's the Florida Panthers, and they always take a little bit less because of the tax situation. I think if you can get Boeser signed for just under 8, you have to do it. Like, if you can get Boeser signed for 7.75 even, which is like $1 million raise on what he's getting paid now. He's like at 6.65. So if you give him $1 million raise on what he's getting now over 8 years, I don't think you can say no to that deal, because you're not finding a player who can score 30, 40 goals for you in free agency paying less. And the guy you're signing in free agency is probably going to be older anyways, right? And if Boeser wants to drive a hard bargain and is asking for 8.5, $9 million plus, which he could. If you look at Timo Meier, what he got, his scoring rate, very similar to Brock Boeser. So it really comes down to how much he's going to push. If the number gets above 8, close to 9, I don't see that happening. But if you can get that number around 8 or slightly below, that's just going to be the going rate to 30, 40 goal scorers. And if you're not willing to pay that price for Boeser, you're going to have to pay that price for somebody else at some point.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you can't really replace a guy like that for cheaper than what you'd sign him for, or re-sign him for. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, okay, speaking of right wingers who can score goals, at least at the AHL level, Jonathan Lekkerimäki. This is probably my favorite thing to daydream about, because I made a video about him a few months ago, and I was looking at all his highlights, and now that he's looking good at the AHL level, do you think there's a chance he'll get called up sooner than we originally thought? Because I need to see him play with Pettersson.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So The one thing about this front office is they don't want to call guys up over every hot streak. I think what they want to do is almost have a guy be overripe to some extent or be very close to ready when they bring him up. And especially with a guy like Lekkerimäki who has so much talent, I don't think they want to have him be in a yo-yo situation. Now, hey, if you hit injuries and you're in a desperate situation, you got to do what you got to do. You got to bring a guy up and he's got to play for you. But I think as long as that need isn't massive at the moment, probably give him some time and let him stay. So I don't know if it expedites things. I think his game's going to determine that though, right? Right now he's scoring, he's shooting, he's doing all the things you want him to do. On the 5-on-5 play, and I'm not saying he's been bad. There's still some things though that they want him to work on and clean up. And you know how important the 5-on-5 stuff is for the head coach. So the last thing you want to do is just because he's scoring a few goals, call him up, and then he comes here and the coach is like, dude, you're not in the right spot. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And then you get healthy scratch again. And now you're back to square one, right? So I think what they want to do is be very confident that the coach can trust him and feel good about his game. Now, the thing about that is he's a very smart hockey player, and I actually think his details are outstanding. I think he does a really good job of doing the right thing on the ice, but it's still different when you have the system the Canucks have. There's still stuff you have to create muscle memory for and really, understand and do repeatedly. And those are the things that I think he's kind of working on, but I have all the faith in the world in his details being good. I think he's going to be a good offensive player. I think the question is for Lekkerimäki is he going to be a 20-25 goal guy in the NHL, or is he going to be a 30-plus guy? Like, I think he's playing in the NHL. It's just a matter of when is he going to be in the NHL. And I don't know if this expedite things, but it comes down to the details. And if he shows strong details the next few weeks, then they may not have a choice but to bring him up.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, you want to reward a player when he's playing well, but you run the risk, especially these young guys, calling them up and then they don't perform at the NHL level, or even worse, they underperform significantly, and then that confidence they had that they had worked up at the AHL level kind of just gets thrown out the window, and they start from square one again. So I didn't really consider that. That's a good point, because yeah, you don't want to do that. I feel like that the Canucks management, not this current management, but I feel like they've made that mistake in the past with some of their older prospects. Not going to mention any names, but
no, for sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, would Podkolzin still be a Canuck if he was handled differently? Maybe, right? I mean, maybe it would have been different. Who knows, right? I mean, he looked great in his rookie year too, and we were all kind of surprised that he wasn't able to build on what he did his first season. But I think that's something that they've talked about too internally and even externally, that they don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And they think it's better for a player to over-ripen as opposed to being thrown into the deep end too soon. And you saw what they did with Höglander 2 years ago. They sent him down. He didn't like it. He worked on his game, but look at what he's become after that, right?
Yeah. And I hope they, I trust them. Like I said before, I hope Aatu Räty be bouncing around. I mean, he's a bit older, but I hope that doesn't affect him either, because I'm still holding out hope for him. I think he can be. I think right now my ceiling for Räty's probably like okay, not a ceiling, but expectation would be like a third line center, like a solid third line center in the league. If he ends up being a second, maybe that'd be awesome. But anyways, okay. So I've been on the fence about this topic because I don't know whether it's overdone talking about it, but like, every game that passes, it gets more and more mysterious. And I know you spoke about this on Canucks Central just a few days ago, but what do you think is going on with Elias Pettersson?
Man, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? And I wish I had like the answer for you.
I need the answer, man.
You need the answer. I know. But the thing is, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's so easy in these situations to nail it down to one specific thing. Say it's a lack of confidence, or it's the injuries that have kept him back, or it's all in his head and he's overthinking things. It could be a little bit of everything. I think what I would go back to though is we've seen this from Pettersson in the past, and that's not to say it justifies a player going half a season playing the way he has, but we saw this a few years back after he signed his 3-year contract. Remember the struggles he had coming back, and the first half of the year he couldn't score, and fans were like, what the hell happened? You should trade this guy. And then when Boudreau came in, it just kind of turned around, right? Like he found his game, he got healthy, he felt confident, and then he just blew up the rest of that year, and then he had 100 points the following season, and it looked terrific, right? So we've seen him go through this in the past. Is the injury playing a part? I don't think the skating stats and the shot stats, and that's his speed, his burst, and the shot, velocity going down from the last few years is a coincidence. And usually that points to something being amiss physically. So I think that plays a part into it. But I do know he's a good enough hockey player to still be effective when he's not fully healthy. And that's something that the team is talking about with him too. I think it's a combination of health. He's in his own head a little bit, needs to get things going again. But I have confidence he's going to figure this out. And because we've seen him go through something like this and he's come out the other end of it, and the fact that it's unprecedented in National Hockey League history for a player to be as talented as he is, to all of a sudden just lose his ability. Like, it's never happened before.
Yeah,
so I don't think
I'm thinking as well.
You know, so I don't think he's going to be the first guy to do it. But obviously, you get to a point where you wonder, is he the type of player that needs to have things be right for him to perform at his best? And that can't be the case, because when you're the best player on a team, the highest paid player on a team, you have to find a way to be consistent. You see the best players in the league, they're injured, they still find a way to contribute. They're not 100%. There's still players that are effective out there. And that's not to say Pettersson hasn't been effective. He's actually been terrific defensively, but that's not good enough when you're making 11.6, like everybody says. Everyone likes to bring the money up, right? So he needs to score. I think it's all going to come along, especially for guys 25 years old. But unfortunately, I wish I had the answer for you. I just don't. And I don't think anybody really does.
I know. And that's why it's just so interesting to talk about. Because you mentioned the injury, and I'm putting quotations on that only because, I mean, unless you know for a fact there's an injury, I don't understand how, like, he hasn't even sat out one game. I don't understand why. Like, what is it? What is the injury?
Yeah, knee tendonitis. And he did admit, even in training camp, that he was still dealing with it throughout the offseason. It's not 100%, but he feels like it's not a problem. It affected his training. So what I understand from that injury, and again, like, I'm just giving information that I've heard asking around about these things. I am not a doctor. I'm not somebody that's a authority on diagnosing knee tendonitis. But my understanding on that type of injury or that type of issue, it doesn't solve itself over the course of a week or two, or even 3 weeks. Like, it's something that you need either extended time off. We're talking about weeks upon weeks and months, or it's something that just takes time to rectify itself. And if that's the case, I'm not sure him sitting out a game makes a difference. And the concerning thing would be, though, that with the time off he had in the offseason, if that didn't solve things, how long is that going to take?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I'm not sure taking a week or two off is going to solve this. And that's where I think I wouldn't say disconnect, but you saw Pettersson himself mention the knee thing, but the team kind of downplayed the whole injury fact. From what my understanding is, the team understands he has to play through whatever this is. They don't think it's something that's debilitating, but I don't think there's a solution of, hey, have a week or two off and you're going to get better. So it kind of becomes if it's a mind over matter thing, you have to figure that out. And if it's something you got to deal with this year, you got to figure out how to deal with it. And you got to figure out how to still overcome and be productive. And that might be harsh, but that's kind of the reality of being one of the highest paid players in the league, or being an important player on a team. Sometimes you're not going to be 100%. And some years you're not going to have it for the entire year, but how do you find a way to contribute? How do you find a way to still be very productive? And I think that's part of the challenge here with Pettersson is, how much is it the injury actually holding him back, and how much of it is mental? And I'm not sure taking time off right now is going to solve the issue, unless we're talking about months on end. But here's the thing. I even heard that if a guy takes 2 months off with the tendonitis, it may still be there, right? It's one of those things that's not an easy thing to rectify right away. So again, I'm not trying to play doctor, just sharing the information that I hear, but I'm not sure, taking a day or two off is going to change anything.
I guess where I get confused is the communication part of things. Like, I'm not saying he should do this, but okay, well, maybe this is dumb, but if it was me, I feel like I just like come out, do a press conference and be like, guys, I'm injured and it's driving me nuts. I'm working my ass off. Can you just like trust that I'm going to, cause like when he's just like, oh, I think I'm playing okay. And I'm, I got an injury.
Yeah.
Like if the noise, right? Like the people who are talking about this a lot meaner than we are right now, and we're being nice. I think he's gonna be fine. If that is bothering him, I would love for the team or someone to make a statement being like, look, he's dealing with this injury, and he just signed the biggest contract in Canucks history. He's feeling a little pressure right now, but he'll get through it. But I mean, hey, they pay people in the PR department a lot of money to figure this out. So I'm sure I'm wrong on this. It's just I guess it's just become a mystery to me, and that's what I'm trying to solve. Because I mean, everyone listening knows that I'm a supporter of this team, and with Pettersson, like just like you, I have no worry. He's going to be fine. but it's just this question mark that I'm like, I wonder what it is. And maybe like even after he gets back and puts up a 40-goal season or something, I still think we'll look back to this time and be like, I wonder what was wrong. Like, what happened there? It might be something we don't figure out until years after his career ends and he, writes a book or something.
Well, I mean, and I think the other part of it, and I think you make a great point, and I don't think you're wrong in saying it would be better if there was some transparency as far as maybe bringing down the temperature in the room. But the issue, I think, with that is when it comes to a lot of these NHL players, a lot of them play through a lot of stuff. Like, for instance, look at JT, right? And we all know he's banged up. He even slightly admitted it right before the season began. But since then, he won't even acknowledge it. Even remember a few games ago where he had to leave after the face-off? He was asked about it after games. No, I'm fine. He doesn't even acknowledge he has an injury, right? Last year, the whole Hronek thing and him and J-Pat kind of got into it. But like we all knew behind the scenes that Hronek was dealing with an injury. It seemed to be an elbow injury. Like I have it on very good authority. He had an injury. But he never admitted it. He never admitted that he had the injury. So I think there's this mentality in the room that we don't use excuses. We're not going to be blaming injuries. We're going to keep that stuff internal, and we're not going to be giving anybody an excuse for their play. If you're hurt enough, if you can play, the expectation is you're going to perform. If you're so hurt you can't play, then don't play. And as long as he's playing, I don't think any of these guys want to use excuses. So I'm with you as far as transparency goes, but as far as that room, and especially under this head coach, it seems like using injuries as any excuse is a no-go, and pretty much nobody on the team does it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's why I'm not on the ice on the team. Because if it was me and they'd be like, why haven't you scored in 20 games? I'd be like, oh yeah, I have a sore finger. But I love JT, man. He's so funny. I swear he could come out with no legs and they'll be like, hey, are you injured? Like, no, I'm fine. I'm just like 100% roll away. But I love JT. Let's predict the outcome of the most important event happening tonight, Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Who do you think is going to win, Satiar Shah? The Canucks or the Ducks?
I love the way you framed that question. For a second, I'm like, oh man, do I have to get political here?
I put you on the spot.
You did. I'm like, oh god. No, I think the Canucks win this one. I think the Canucks win this one. And I think also, so I want to get your perspective on this. As far as watching the Canucks, are you more concerned about process right now or results? Like, because we know they're getting results, but do you care more about the 2 points or do you care more about how they play against the Ducks?
It's definitely the process, because I think that's what Tocchet is more focused on right now. They could lose 5-1. I mean, if they did, I'm sure that means they're not playing his system properly. But they could lose a game, and he'd probably be more mad if they lost it, if they won a game not playing the process or not playing his system, as opposed to losing a game and doing everything he said perfectly. That's at least what I imagine. And this early into the season, like, they know they have the talent to get to the playoffs. They know that they can do damage once they get there. But what is it? Between 30 and 40% on any given night are new players, right? So it would make sense to me if they're just trying to get all these new guys into the system, all playing together. Like you mentioned earlier, that muscle memory. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing right now. And they're getting the points. I mean, they haven't been like lights out. They haven't been the Jets or even the Capitals, but they're getting points. So it's not like a loss tonight or even just a couple losses here and there is going to do that much damage, as long as they're making progress with the system Tocchet wants them to play in. At least that's what I imagine. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm with you on the process, because I think a good process is going to allow them to be more successful over the course of the season. So I'm with you. I'd rather see process here tonight, but I love to see process and result. That's kind of what I would love to see against a team like Anaheim, is play closer to your identity than you did against the Sharks, but also win the game. I mean, I'd love to see that, but process does trump it. The thing I would say, though, is the first 20 games of the year, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we started the podcast, that no team is going to forge its identity fully in 10, 15, 20 games. It's about how do you build towards it and how do you keep your head above water the first 20 games of the year, that you're not digging yourself out of a hole. So I could live with another bad process game and a results, because I'm like, hey, at least you're picking up points, and we're going to sit here at the 20 game mark and not be under 500. And that means you have a great chance of being a playoff team. And then from that point on, it really becomes about results. But I think the good teams start forging their identity really early. They started really showing signs of it. And we haven't seen enough signs from the Canucks so far. So I would live with, a loss against the Ducks, even if they play their cleanest game of all season and get goalied by Dostal. And by the way, Lucas Dostal is an incredible goaltender. If he goalies the Canucks, I think people should respect that guy. He might be the next up-and-coming great goaltender. He's been lights out for the Ducks this year. He's the only reason the Ducks even keep their heads above water some of these games. They can't score. They're not good defensively, but they get saves from Dostal. So if you play a great game and get goalied, I can live with that with the process. I worry more about where the process is going to be after the 20-game mark, because I think if you don't figure out what you are after 20 games and don't hone in on it over the next to the 50-game mark, I don't think those teams figure it out. So I think that's going to be the pressure point. But we're so early in the season that as long as you're getting results, I'm not panicking about this team.
Yeah, how do you think Talkett's seen these first 10 games? Because honestly, I've been so focused on just working, putting these videos together. I actually haven't heard much from him, but I know he's been talking. And I know he's mentioned some things with Pettersson. He wants him to get going. But when I see the power play struggling as much as it has for the past few games, but the penalty kill being one of the better ones in the league, to me that kind of sounds like, the process is coming together, But yeah, the power play kind of leaves me confused. Like, where do you think he stands with the players right now?
I think that he's been frustrated. I don't think he's happy with where they are with their process yet. And I think the power play stuff, this goes back to last year too, the second half in the playoffs, and that power play not looking good. But it's really the 5-on-5 play the rush chances they're giving up. So last year, the Canucks were amongst the best in the league and not allowing rush chances. And this year, they're one of the worst in the league in allowing rush chances. But everything else in their game is good. It's just those rush chances. So I think if you clean that up, I think you'll be a lot happier as far as their 5-on-5 play goes. I think that he expected better focus when it came to details this year, and he hasn't gotten that. We've seen some uncharacteristic mistakes on those rush chances. You know how last year we talked about how good they are on the line changes. They've had a couple bad line changes that led to chances and goals as well. They've missed assignments, which they didn't miss last year. He speaks a lot about protecting the rail. It's the imaginary line across the hash marks in the defensive zone and the circles, and protecting the middle. They haven't done that as effectively. They were better last game. They've been better, in moments. So those things I think he's frustrated with. He expected more out of the group. But I do think he's also very understanding of it's early in the year, and I'm not overly concerned about where we're going to finish. But I do think he's frustrated that the details that were so good last year haven't been as good so far this year. And I do think he's somewhat bewildered that the guys in the power play, and it was a bit better last game against the Sharks. They moved the puck around better, and perhaps as a sign of it getting going again, that they keep reverting back to trying to make specific plays. And they keep reverting back to trying to find JT or make the perfect pass or make sure you execute a play as opposed to taking what's available to you. And I think at some point you're going to be at the end of your wits with those things if players don't show it. So I think his frustration with the power play goes back to last year. And I think that he's a bit surprised. I'm not reporting this, but I'm just saying, I think he's a bit surprised that the power play hasn't been more organic and it still has been too mechanical so far.
Yeah, the video I'm working on right now is dissecting a lot of those failed power plays and trying to figure out what's going wrong. And one of the things I've noticed is the first unit will come out for a minute and a half, and really struggle not only to get set up, but when they are set up, passes aren't working. They're bouncing over sticks, and they're missing the net when they get the opportunity to shoot. And then the second unit comes out, and it's just like they make it look so easy. They gain the zone, and then Sprong gets a shot on net. The first unit didn't even get a shot on net some of these times. It makes me think like, yeah, they must just be looking for that perfect pass or that perfect play. And it drives me nuts. I imagine Talkett would be pulling out his hair if he had any. So, we're both pretty optimistic about this. Basically, everything we've touched on, whether it be Pettersson or the defense or now the power play, I think we're both pretty optimistic that it'll be all right. Is there anything that we're not optimistic about? Is there anything that we're like, this actually might be a problem? And there's nothing. I'm just curious.
Honestly, so I think the biggest thing for me is on the back end, and I'd say specifically the Carson Soucy-Myers pairing, and specifically Carson Soucy, because I loved what Carson Soucy brought last year, and I thought he was terrific and maybe one of the more underrated players on this team. But is he truly capable of playing 20 minutes a game in a bigger role from the start of the season all year? And can you rely on those guys to be able to be a steady pairing for you? And this goes back to that whole conversation we had about the defense and what type of player do they have to add, and maybe somebody that can carry their own D pair. That's probably the one I wouldn't say pessimistic, but most concerned about is, do they, even the guy we thought was going to be our linchpin for this team, can he truly handle that role? Because he's never done that before. And even last year, he's playing 17 minutes a game, generally speaking. And in the playoffs, of course, he was really good with Myers, but he wasn't playing 22, 23 minutes a game. He wasn't playing high leverage situations consistently because they had Cole, they had Zadorov. They don't have those guys to insulate him this year. So that's my one, I'd say, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but it's certainly on my radar. Like, can these guys get it done defensively? And do you truly not only need another defenseman, but a guy that can truly be your number 3 defenseman?
I wonder why they, again, I really do trust their decisions. During the offseason, I did expect them to make a move for a more significant defender, but I guess that's easier said than done because they obviously didn't. Do you know what happened there? Like they really overloaded on offense.
I'm with you because there were so many righty defensemen as well. But I think what happened was a lot of these guys ended up going for a lot more than they felt comfortable for. Like Matt Roy got, $5 million per year. I think it was 4 or 5 years even. And Zadorov got 6 years, $5 million per year. And I think ultimately they didn't feel comfortable paying that type of money for a guy they felt was more of a 4, maybe a 5. And I think that's something that kind of kept them from making that type of commitment. But I'm with you. I expected, if you're not bringing Zadorov back, I expected more than Desharnais and Forbort as kind of being the big additions. And I think Desharnais is still a project, and we'll see, what he looks like by the end of the year. I actually like Forbort a lot, but he's not a guy who's going to play 22 minutes a game, right? Or 20 minutes a game and carry a D pair. He's really good defensively, good on the PK. I think he's perfect for that third pair role. They weren't able to replace Cole nor Zadorov, and both those guys were borderline 4-5s. And the guys they got were like clearly number 6 defensemen more so, and Desharnais, a guy who's kind of in and out of the lineup. So I'm with you. I was hoping and expecting them to add a more significant defenseman. I think they got priced out on the free agent market, but I do think I don't think their goal was it's going to be Desharnais and Forbort all year, and these are our guys. I think it was pretty clear that when they weren't able to get the guys they wanted, they made some more minor moves that can fit under your cap and give you depth, and then they'll probably try to address that on the trade market. Now, it's not going to be easy to address it on the trade market, of course, but, like you said, how confident are you that this front office that's been the most active in trades since it came to Vancouver can find a trade? I would agree that I feel pretty good about them doing so, but that's the one thing. I really wish, like you, that they would have been able to add one more quality defenseman in the offseason.
I am really confident with the management, like you said, and the thing I'm a little critical of, and I don't want to, I'm ready to be proven wrong, or not even proven wrong. Just I was a little confused by the Desharnais signing, just because it was 2 years, $2 million, and is he that much? I mean, like you said, he's a project, so maybe they see a better future for him. But I don't even know how much of an upgrade over someone like Juleson he is right now, or even Friedman when he's healthy. Just based on how he's played so far, but it is only 10 games into the season, so I guess we'll see.
Well, I don't think you're wrong though. Again, the reason I'm giving Desharnais time is because we spoke to Desharnais at training camp, and when I spoke to management, they both said the same thing, that we believe in him. We signed him because we think he can play an everyday player for us, but we think that him working with our coaching staff, he can find another level. And when we spoke to Desharnais, myself and Reach, in Penticton, he was telling us that he foresees himself improving over the course of the year. And he cited Tyler Myers specifically and said, look at how Myers played game 1 last year and what he looked like by the end of game 82.
Oh,
so,
cool.
So I'm okay. You know what? Fair, right? And he and the organization have both said, let's see what this looks like at the end of the year. So I'm okay to give it time and see what it happens. But I would not have signed Desharnais. If it was up to me, I would not have signed Desharnais. I would have rather you save the $2 million, run with Noah Juleson and Friedman, like you said, and save that money either for cap space, for trade, or look to do other things with it, right? So that's what I would have done as well. I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to get him to be the player they hope he can be. That's why I'm a little bit reluctant on the whole thing. It's $2 million, so it's not like you're expecting a guy to be a top 4 defenseman, but can he be a number 4? Can he be number 5? Can he be an everyday number 6 that's dependable? And he hasn't shown those things yet, right? And I don't mind you trying these things, because what you have to find is your organizational advantages, the edge you have as an organization. For many years, it's been goaltending here, right? Their ability to not only identify goalies, but to get the best out of goalies. And at least through the first year and a bit, it seems like this coaching staff is able to get the best out of their defensemen. They're able to get them to play at the top of their potential. So if you really believe that this coaching staff can get the best out of guys, then I don't mind you taking some bets to see if you can hit some home runs. there's a fine line sometimes between taking advantage of your strengths and having hubris and thinking you can turn anybody into somebody. And I think you got to be careful with those things. But because it's a $2 million signing, I don't think it's something that we should be reading the riot act over and say
Right.
that they don't know what they're doing over. But I'm with you. It's not a signing I would have made, and I'm giving it time to see how it all unfolds. But so far, obviously, it hasn't been the fit that I had hoped.
Yeah, I mean, now I guess his size and the fact he's a right-handed shot also boosted that price up a bit too.
For sure.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, I mentioned it right before we hit record, but I just want to thank you for reaching out, because back in February, for everyone listening, Satiar reached out and said he liked the videos I was making, and at the time, it was a lot. Like I was really working on a ton of stuff at the same time, and it was beginning to burn out. And that message really helped me. It really boosted me, because knowing that what I'm doing is reaching respected media members, veteran media members like yourself. I don't know, it just meant a lot, and you didn't need to send that message. So I'm very grateful for that. And I also wanted to ask, how did you find them?
Oh, honestly, so I full disclosure, I go on YouTube quite a bit to watch sports clips. I'm a huge soccer fan. Like, I love Chelsea is my favorite soccer team. So I will oftentimes go and go watch videos of YouTubers breaking down Chelsea matches and stuff like that. I actually, we were talking about this before. I know people sometimes maybe look at the whole YouTube thing as like, oh, you're just YouTubers. I love the content people put out on YouTube. I think there are a lot of smart sports fans like yourself who are very good at putting clips together and then making it look interesting and fun. And I think that's something really cool that we see people do nowadays, people that are very, very good with technology to be able to do these things effectively. So it just kind of popped up on my screen, if you watch this, recommended for you. And obviously I'll go look for, hockey clips a lot on YouTube and things that I look for when I'm researching. So it just kind of popped up, Nuckhead and breakdown Canucks. So I'm like, I just played one. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. I watched a few. Then I subscribed. I was like watching your videos every time they came out. I'm like, this is really fun. They're entertaining. They're informative. They're really well done. And I'm not saying just positive for sake of being positive, but it doesn't have this kind of condescending tone to it either. I think it's really fun and upbeat, and I think that you do a great job with it. And I think we should recognize when people do good work in this industry. And as somebody that was grinding many years ago as well, trying to get recognized, it's about paying it forward. But I would not have messaged you if I didn't think you were doing good work. And I really enjoy your YouTube channel, for real.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. That makes my day. Like, I think that's so cool, because there does seem to be a divide between traditional media and the guys like me doing the YouTube thing, which podcasts like this might be helping bridge that. I also just got to say, like, since I've started voicing these opinions publicly, I've really gained a whole new respect for how much professionalism goes into what you do. Like, I have the luxury of recording this right now, and I'm going to spend the next couple hours editing it. Same goes for my videos, but you're on live radio, live television, voicing your opinions. I don't know how you don't ramble or argue with people or screw up. So, like, if it was me, I feel like it'd be a mess. So, I really understand, just more so than I did before, just how difficult that is and how much of a skill it is too. So yeah, I mean, you're killing it too. I don't know if you need me to say that, but you're killing it too.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that. But I mean, the reality is it's all repetition. I mean, I still have moments I stumble, things happen. You just got to do things. You got to repeat things. And to be honest, the stuff on video is the future. For all this talk about traditional media, podcasts, articles and radio shows, the future is all the stuff on video, man. Like the stuff that, on the YouTube, the stuff that you're doing. But also, I think what we're going to see as time goes on is the major media really take that stuff on to become part of how they do things. Like, I think we're seeing it even a little bit. Like, you see Steve Dangle do his thing. It's been on Sportsnet at times. And there's stuff like that comes out. But I think the production on videos and putting them together and then having commentary, I think that very much is the future. And I can see my industry, or our industry, heading that way on a more official level, I should say. I wouldn't say professional, because I think there is still a lot of unprofessionalism with legitimate media. And I don't think we should call media that's on YouTube, independent media, unprofessional, because I think a lot of the so-called unprofessionals do a great job with their professionalism.
Would there ever be a moment you would refer to Nils Höglander as Big Hog on live television as a wink to the Nuckhead audience? Is that possible? Or that,
hey,
that
no, I mean, hey, It might be right on the line. It might be right on the line. See, sometimes it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. And I think that's one of the ones you would beg for forgiveness if they say anything for.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, yeah, I guess last thing to ask you would just be, I know you said the Canucks would win tonight, but you got to predict the score. That's kind of a tradition here.
All right.
And maybe even toss in a goal scorer too, if you're feeling fancy.
Okay, I'll say 3-1 Canucks, and Pettersson gets a goal. How about that?
Ooh, oh, man. Okay, that's perfect. I say 5-2, Ratu scores.
I love it. Guy just gets called up, gets the goal. I love it.
I mean, he's got to prove himself. Okay, well, yeah, thank you for doing this, dude. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, man, my pleasure, man. I'll reach out down the road and we'll chat again.
Thank you so much, dude.
You got it, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.